After the surgery, I came home exhausted and discovered my suitcase sitting outside with a post-it note stuck to the handle. It's just the three of us now. Find somewhere else to stay. Signed, your daughter-in-law. I called the bank without hesitation and froze every single credit card. I'm so grateful to have you here with me. Follow my journey to the end and tell me what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. My fingers shook uncontrollably as I read the note for the third time, desperately hoping the cruel words would somehow transform into something kinder. The blazing afternoon sun felt like fire against my exhausted body as I stood there in my wrinkled hospital gown, staring at the house that had been my sanctuary for 3 long years. I pounded on the door with my fist. What else could I do? I kept pounding until my knuckles were raw and bleeding, screaming Charles's name until my throat burned. My son. My precious only child, the boy I had raised single-handedly after his father's heart attack when he was barely 12 years old. The only sound that greeted me was crushing silence and Lucy's sharp voice from inside, hissing at the children to stay quiet. A curtain twitched for just a moment, and I caught sight of my 8-year-old grandson's terrified face before Lucy jerked him away from the window. The curtain snapped shut, and that's when the awful truth hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't going to let me in. Not today, not ever. I collapsed onto my suitcase, my mind spinning as I tried to make sense of this nightmare. 3 years ago, when Harold's cancer finally took him, Charles and Lucy had practically begged me to sell my house and move in with them. Mom, it's the perfect solution. Charles had insisted, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. You can help us with the kids, we'll take care of you as you age, and the money from your house can help us expand ours into something really special. It had felt like a beautiful dream back then. $178,000. Every penny I had contributed to their home renovations. Nearly everything from selling the cozy little house where Harold and I had built our life together over 30 precious years. Think of it as investing in our family's future. Charles had promised me, his voice warm with love. And I had believed every single word. I remembered exactly how the changes had crept in, slow and poisonous. At first, I was Grandma Alice, the cherished family matriarch who made fluffy Sunday pancakes and helped with tricky math homework. Then I became Mom, the reliable babysitter and cook, while Lucy indulged in her endless self-care rituals and spa days. Finally, I was just Alice, the bothersome old woman cluttering up their gorgeous home. Lucy's transformation was the most painful to watch. Her genuine smiles twisted into cold, tight-lipped acknowledgements. Her grateful "thank you so much for watching the kids" became dismissive. Well, that's what grandmothers do. The family outings and movie nights gradually disappeared until I was nothing more than the forgotten babysitter they left behind. I fumbled for my phone with trembling fingers and dialed Charles's number. It went straight to voicemail without even ringing. I tried again, my heart racing with panic. The same result. A text message would have to be enough. Charles, I'm standing outside the house right now. I just had major surgery. Please, please let me come inside. I watched the message status change from delivered to read, my heart hammering against my ribs. No response came. Nothing. The afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, and with it, the terrifying reality of my situation crashed over me like a tidal wave. I was 68 years old, barely recovering from gallbladder surgery, with absolutely nowhere to go. The hospital had sent me home with detailed care instructions, never imagining that home would no longer exist for me. As the evening chill started to bite through my thin hospital clothes, I finally accepted the devastating truth. No one was coming to rescue me from this doorstep. With hands that felt like they belonged to someone else, I grabbed the handle of my suitcase and started walking into the unknown. Every single step sent lightning bolts of agony through my abdomen where the surgical wounds were still trying to heal. I had exactly $43 crumpled in my wallet, enough for a taxi ride somewhere. But where could I possibly go? A hotel would devour my meager cash within days. My sister lived halfway across the country. My dearest friend Dewey had downsized to a tiny apartment after her husband's funeral. I stumbled to a bench at the bus stop and set my suitcase down beside me like a faithful dog. A crushing wave of betrayal slammed into me, bringing tears that felt like they would never stop. How could Charles do this to me? The same little boy who used to make me Mother's Day cards covered in glitter and construction paper hearts, telling me I was his superhero. The young man I had worked 2 grueling jobs to put through college, sacrificing everything for his future, my son. My baby, and Lucy. God, how I had tried with Lucy. I had respected every single one of her parenting choices, never criticized or interfered, helped whenever she snapped her fingers. I thought we had built something real together. Maybe not deep love, but at least genuine respect and caring. The cruelty of their timing felt like a knife twisting in my chest. They had waited until I was completely helpless, fresh from the operating table, to throw me away like garbage. Had this been their plan all along? Was I nothing more than a convenient source of free childcare and easy money until I became too much trouble to keep around? As the streetlights flickered to life around me, I pulled out my phone again and scrolled through my contacts with shaking fingers. My thumb hovered over Dewey's name. We had been best friends for over 40 incredible years, through first marriages and babies and divorces and second chances and now widowhood. If anyone in this world would understand my pain, it would be her. The phone rang 3 eternal times before her beloved familiar voice answered. Alice, honey, is everything okay? I opened my mouth to speak, but only a broken sob escaped. Alice, what's wrong? Weren't you supposed to have your surgery today? Doy? I finally whispered, my voice barely audible. I need help. They've locked me out of the house. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then her voice came back strong and fierce. Tell me exactly where you are right now. I'm coming to get you. As I sat there waiting for my oldest friend to save me, I watched a young family stroll past on the sidewalk. The mother was holding her little boy's hand, laughing at something silly he had said to her. Such a simple, beautiful moment of pure connection. It hit me like a sledgehammer how completely my own family had destroyed every bond we had ever shared. How utterly disposable I had become to the people I loved most. I closed my eyes tight, feeling the unbearable weight of betrayal pressing down on me, heavier than my suitcase. Heavier than all my 68 years of living and loving and trying. Dewey's spare room was nothing fancy, just a narrow twin bed, a scratched dresser and a simple reading lamp. But that night, it felt like the most sacred sanctuary in the world. My surgical wounds throbbed with every breath as Dewey helped me get settled, her face a careful mask hiding her explosive fury. I cannot believe Charles would do this to you, she said, fluffing pillows behind my aching back. After absolutely everything you've sacrificed for that boy. I couldn't believe it either, but the evidence was staring me in the face. My suitcase, hastily stuffed by Lucy with only some of my clothes and none of my treasured keepsakes, sat in the corner like a monument to my shattered new reality. Have you tried calling him again? Doy asked, gently pressing a steaming cup of chamomile tea into my trembling hands. I nodded, accepting the warm mug like a lifeline. 17 times since this afternoon. He's reading every single text I send, but he won't respond to any of them. Doy perched on the edge of the bed, her silver hair catching the soft lamplight. We had been inseparable friends since our wild 20s, back when we were both young mothers trying to figure out how to juggle demanding careers and demanding children. She had held my hand through Harold's agonizing death, and now she was here for this, my brutal eviction from my son's heart. You need to rest now, she said with gentle firmness. Tomorrow morning, we'll figure out what comes next. But sleep felt impossible. Every time I closed my exhausted eyes, I saw Lucy's cold handwriting on that devastating post-it note. Now it's just the 3 of us. The casual cruelty of those words made my chest ache worse than my healing surgical wounds. Morning arrived with gentle rain tapping against the window like fingers. I checked my phone with desperate hope. No messages from Charles, no missed calls. Just the deafening digital silence of complete abandonment. Let's get some breakfast into you, Doy said, appearing in the doorway like an angel. Then we need to have some serious conversations about your next steps. Over strong coffee and buttered toast, I poured out every detail to Dewey. How I had sold my beloved house to help Charles and Lucy achieve their dreams. How the renovations had transformed their modest 3-bedroom home into a sprawling 5-bedroom showcase with a gourmet kitchen. And luxurious master suite. I invested almost $180,000 of my life savings, I said, stirring my coffee in endless circles. Charles looked me in the eyes and promised it was an investment in our shared future, that I would always have a secure home with them. Dewey's expression grew darker with every word. Did you get any of this in writing? Some kind of legal contract or agreement? I shook my head, feeling foolish. He's my son, Dewey. I trusted him completely. The words hung between us like a confession, their innocence painfully obvious now. We should check all your bank accounts right away, Doy suggested with careful gentleness. We need to make sure they don't have access to anything else. My stomach dropped to the floor. I hadn't even thought about that possibility. Charles had helped me set up all my online banking after Harold's funeral. Just for emergencies, he had assured me. He had access to my accounts, and I had given Lucy my credit card for groceries and little things for my grandchildren. With hands that wouldn't stop shaking, I logged into my bank account on Doe's tablet. Sweet relief flooded through me when I saw my savings account was completely untouched. But when I clicked on my credit card statement, that relief vanished like smoke. $3,200 at Nordstrom, $1,700 at some fancy place called Sephora. Doy peered over my shoulder, her voice tight with anger. Since when did you become such a high-end shopper, Alice? I didn't buy any of this, I whispered, scrolling through charge after outrageous charge. Designer clothes, expensive makeup, fancy dinners at restaurants I had never even heard of, all charged in the past 3 weeks, while I was preparing for surgery and trusting them with my life. The most recent charge had been posted just yesterday. $4,500 at something called Elite Furniture Gallery. They're redecorating my room, I said as the pieces fell into place like a horrible puzzle. They were planning this whole thing, just waiting for me to be out of the house so they could replace all my furniture. Doy's face flushed bright red with rage. Those ungrateful, selfish little... I need to cancel these cards immediately, I interrupted, feeling a strange new calm settling over me like armor. It was the first moment of clear decision I had felt since discovering my suitcase on their doorstep. I need to freeze absolutely everything. With Doe's steady support, I called the bank and took control. Yes, I wanted to report unauthorized card usage. Yes, I wanted to dispute every single recent charge. And yes, I wanted to freeze all my credit cards this very moment. Ma'am, please understand this will prevent any new charges from being approved, the bank representative cautioned me. Perfect, I said with newfound strength. That's exactly what I want to happen. After I hung up, I leaned back in the chair, physically exhausted but feeling something completely unexpected. A tiny but fierce spark of personal power. They might have discarded me like yesterday's newspaper, but I still had control over my own financial life. What happens now? Dewey asked, squeezing my hand with love. I need to get my personal belongings back, I said firmly. My photo albums, Harold's precious watch, my mother's china set. Everything that matters is still in that house. We'll make it happen, Dewey promised with fierce loyalty. But first, your body needs time to heal properly. Doctor's orders, remember? She was absolutely right, of course. My body needed weeks to recover from major surgery. But as I settled back against the soft pillows, I realized my broken heart would need so much longer to mend. The very next day, my phone rang with Charles's name flashing on the screen. My heart leapt with desperate hope. Maybe he had finally come to his senses. Maybe he was calling to apologize, to beg me to come home where I belonged. I answered before the second ring could finish. Charles? Mom. His voice was cold and controlled. Not the voice of a son filled with remorse and love. There seems to be some kind of problem with your credit cards. No. How are you feeling after your surgery? No. I'm so sorry we locked you out. Just ice-cold concern about money. Yes, I replied, amazed by how steady my own voice sounded. I've frozen every single one of them. A long, tense pause. Lucy was trying to buy groceries for the children, he said with an edge of irritation creeping into his tone. The card got declined at the store. Was she buying groceries at Nordstrom and Elite Furniture Gallery too? I asked pointedly. Or were those purchases something entirely different? Another pause, much longer this time. Mom, you gave Lucy permission to use those cards for emergencies and household necessities, he said defensively. Necessities, I corrected him sharply. Not thousands and thousands of dollars spent on whatever luxury items she wanted. I heard him take a sharp, frustrated breath. Look, I don't have time for this drama right now. Just unfreeze the cards immediately. We can discuss spending limits some other time. The casual dismissiveness in his voice lit a fire inside me. A slow-burning anger that had been building since the moment I saw that cruel post-it note. No, Charles, I said quietly but firmly. I absolutely will not do that. Excuse me? The genuine surprise in his voice was almost satisfying. You've made it crystal clear that I'm no longer part of your family, I continued, choosing each word carefully. So Lucy will have to find some other way to pay for her shopping sprees. Mom, you're being completely unreasonable. I was reasonable when I sold my house to help expand yours, I shot back. I was reasonable when I watched your children every single day while you and Lucy built your careers. I was reasonable when I cooked and cleaned and made myself useful in every possible way. Where has all that reasonableness gotten me, Charles? Silence stretched between us then. This really isn't a good time to have this discussion. It's never a good time with you anymore, I said, the painful truth settling deep in my chest. Goodbye, Charles. I hung up with my hand trembling, but my resolve stronger than it had ever been. In the doorway, Dewey stood watching with a small, proud smile lighting up her face. Well, well, she said with satisfaction. Look who finally discovered her backbone. I managed a weak but genuine smile in return. Freezing the credit cards is just the very beginning, I said with growing determination. I need to find out what else they've been doing with my money behind my back. As I spoke those words, a text message popped up on my phone screen. Charles, this is completely childish, Mom. Call me back when you're ready to act like an adult about this situation. I showed the message to Dewey, who made a sound of complete disbelief. The incredible irony of him calling you childish, she muttered angrily, after the way they've behaved. I set the phone down with deliberate care, feeling that strange new calm settling over me again. The initial shock and heartbreak were still there, raw and painful. But something else was rising up inside me now. Pure, unshakable determination. They had stolen my home, my security, and my place in the family I had created. But they would not take one more thing from me. Not one more penny of my money. Not one more piece of my dignity. Not one more day of my life. A week crawled by with absolutely no word from Charles. My surgical wounds were slowly healing, but the gaping wound of betrayal felt fresh and raw every single day. Dewey had become my lifeline, but I couldn't impose on her generous heart forever. I needed to retrieve my personal belongings and figure out what my life would look like now. I'm definitely coming with you, Dewey insisted when I mentioned returning to Charles's house. You really don't have to do that. I absolutely do, she said firmly, grabbing her car keys. Besides, they're much less likely to slam the door in your face if there's a witness standing right there. The familiar drive to the house I had called home for 3 years felt like traveling through a strange dream. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed Lucy's sleek SUV was nowhere to be seen. But Charles's sedan sat there like a guilty secret. Perfect, Dewey muttered under her breath. Maybe we can actually talk some sense into him without her toxic influence poisoning everything. My legs felt like lead weights as I walked up the pathway I had traveled thousands of times. The flower beds I had lovingly tended were already showing heartbreaking signs of neglect. I pressed the doorbell, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Charles opened the door, genuine surprise flickering across his tired face before it hardened into a guarded mask. He looked exhausted with deep shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. Mom, he said, glancing nervously at Dewey, then back to me. I honestly didn't expect to see you here. Obviously not, I replied, drawing strength from Dewey's solid, reassuring presence beside me. I've come for my things, my personal belongings that belong to me. He hesitated for a long moment, then stepped back reluctantly. Lucy isn't here right now. She took the kids to stay with her mother for a while. The house looked completely different somehow, like a stage set rearranged for a different play. Furniture had been moved around, and a massive modern sectional sofa now dominated the living room. Undoubtedly the expensive purchase from Elite Furniture Gallery. My belongings should be in the guest room, I said, starting toward the familiar staircase. Actually, Charles said, clearing his throat uncomfortably. We've rearranged some things recently. Lucy's converted that room into her home office space now. Ice water ran through my veins. And where are my belongings? Most of your stuff is packed up in boxes out in the garage, he replied, unable to meet my eyes. Lucy thought it would be more convenient for you to collect everything that way. Joy made a disgusted sound deep in her throat. How incredibly thoughtful of her. We followed Charles through the house to the garage where several hastily taped cardboard boxes sat stacked against the wall like discarded memories. I approached them with growing dread in my stomach. The first box contained my clothes, carelessly shoved in without any folding. The second held some books and toiletries, but as I searched frantically through the remaining boxes, panic began rising in my throat like bile. Where are my photo albums? Harold's watch? My mother's jewelry box? Charles shifted his weight uncomfortably from foot to foot. I'm really not sure about those things. Lucy handled all the packing. Well, they're definitely not here, I said, my voice getting higher with each word. And what about my mother's china set? All the family heirlooms? Mom, you need to calm down. Don't you dare tell me to calm down, I snapped, surprising even myself with the raw force of my anger. Those things are completely irreplaceable. They're my memories, my entire history. Joy stepped forward like a protective lioness. Charles, this is absolutely unacceptable. Those are Alice's most precious personal possessions. Charles ran his hand through his hair, looking more like a scolded teenager than a grown man. I'll talk to Lucy about it. Maybe she stored them somewhere else in the house? I want to look upstairs right now, I demanded. This very minute. He hesitated, then nodded with obvious reluctance. I headed straight for the attic, remembering exactly where I had stored some of my older treasures. As I climbed the creaking stairs, Charles's phone rang in the hallway below. He answered it with a hushed, secretive voice. The attic was dusty and dim, but I knew exactly where I had placed my most important storage trunks. To my overwhelming relief, they were still sitting there, completely untouched by Lucy's cruel purge. I opened the largest trunk with trembling hands and found my wedding album, Harold's military medals, and several precious family photo albums. At least these irreplaceable memories had escaped Lucy's heartless destruction. As I gathered everything I could possibly carry, I couldn't help but overhear Charles's whispered conversation drifting up from below. No, she just showed up out of nowhere. Yes, she brought that friend of hers. I know exactly what we agreed on. But what was I supposed to do? She's still my mother, for God's sake. There was a long pause. Lucy, that's completely unfair to me. We specifically discussed waiting until after we sold the house to tell her about the nursing home placement. No, I haven't told her anything yet. She literally just had major surgery. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Nursing home? Selling the house? I crept closer to the attic stairs, straining to catch every devastating word. The real estate agent promised us we could get at least $650,000 with all the renovations we've done. Yes, that's definitely enough to pay off all our debts and put a substantial down payment on that lake house we want. I know Mom's money made all of this possible, but she did agree to invest in the property. My legs nearly collapsed beneath me. They were planning to sell the house I had poured my entire life savings into, and use the money to buy themselves a lake house. And they wanted to warehouse me in some nursing home like a piece of unwanted furniture. I must have gasped out loud because Charles suddenly went completely silent. I have to go right now, he said urgently. She might have heard me talking. I scrambled back to the storage trunk, my mind spinning with this terrible new information. As Charles's footsteps approached the attic stairs, I busied myself with the photo albums, trying desperately to control my shaking hands. Mom, did you manage to find what you were looking for up there? His voice sounded strained and guilty. Some of it, I replied carefully, not trusting myself to say anything more. He helped me carry down what I had found, an awkward silence stretching between us like a chasm. In the garage, Dowie was methodically searching through the remaining boxes with the determination of a detective. Charles, I said finally, my voice surprisingly steady. Were you planning to tell me about selling the house? His face went completely white. You overheard that conversation? Yes, I heard every single word. Just like I heard about the nursing home you've already picked out for me. My voice remained calm despite the hurricane raging inside me. Were you even going to bother consulting me about any of these major decisions? Charles had the decency to look genuinely ashamed. Mom, it's really not what you think it is. We just thought, with your recent health problems. My gallbladder surgery, I interrupted sharply. That's hardly a valid reason to ship me off to a nursing home. I'm 68 years old, not 98. It's just that Lucy thought, I repeated with bitter understanding. And you just went along with whatever she decided, didn't you? Just like you went along with locking me out of my own home. It's not your home, he said, a flash of defiance crossing his tired face. Your name isn't anywhere on the deed. Those words hit me like a physical slap across the face. He was absolutely right, and we both knew it. Despite my massive financial contribution, I had no legal claim whatsoever to the house. I had trusted my son completely, and that blind trust had been my complete downfall. Dory stepped between us, her voice cold as winter ice. We're taking these boxes with us right now. And Charles, I strongly suggest you locate your mother's missing valuables before we're forced to involve the police. As we loaded the pathetic boxes into Dewey's car, I caught a glimpse of papers scattered across Charles's desk through the open garage door. A glossy brochure for Sunny Pines Assisted Living lay right beside what looked like real estate listings. They had been planning this betrayal for months, maybe even years. My eviction, the nursing home, the lake house, every single detail calculated and plotted behind my trusting back. The betrayal cut so deep into my soul that I could barely draw breath. As we drove away from that house for what I knew would be the last time, I felt something stirring beneath the crushing pain. A fierce determination that surprised me with its white-hot intensity. They had stolen everything from me that they possibly could, but they would not determine what happened to me next. Not anymore. Never again. You can stay with me for as long as you need, Dewey insisted as we carried the boxes up to her apartment. I mean every word of that, Alice. I loved her desperately for making that generous offer, but I knew it wasn't a realistic long-term solution. Dewey's tiny one-bedroom apartment was barely adequate for her alone, let alone two grown women. Besides, I needed to learn how to stand on my own 2 feet again, to reclaim my independence. I appreciate your kindness more than you'll ever know, I told her with genuine gratitude, but I need to figure this out for myself. The next morning, I made an appointment with my bank. Martin Geller had been my trusted financial advisor since Harold's death, and his face showed genuine shock when I explained what had happened to me. "I'm so incredibly sorry, Alice," he said, carefully reviewing all my accounts. "The good news is that your pension and social security deposits are still coming in regularly, and your primary savings account remains completely intact. What about all the money I invested in Charles's house?" Martin's expression turned grim and serious. "Without any kind of formal legal agreement, it's technically considered a gift under the law. We might be able to pursue some legal options, but it would be an extremely difficult uphill battle." I nodded, having expected exactly that answer. Then I need to focus all my energy on moving forward. What can I realistically afford for housing? We spent the next hour carefully going over every number. My monthly pension and social security totaled just under $2,400. Not luxurious by any means, but enough to rent a modest apartment and cover my basic living expenses if I was extremely careful with every penny. "There's also this account," Martin said, pulling up something I had almost forgotten about. "Harold's life insurance policy that you invested wisely. It's grown to approximately $42,000. A wave of profound gratitude for my practical, forward-thinking husband washed over me like warm sunlight. Even from beyond the grave, Harold was still protecting and providing for me." "That definitely gives you some real options," Martin continued encouragingly. "You could use part of it for a rental deposit and basic furnishings, and keep the rest as a solid emergency fund." As I left the bank that day, I felt a strange mixture of devastating loss and unexpected possibility. I had so much less than I had expected to have at this stage of my life, but I also had more than many people in similar situations. I could rebuild my life from scratch. I could start over. Over the next 2 intensive weeks, I threw myself completely into apartment hunting. Dwyer drove me to countless viewings, helped me compare prices and neighborhoods, and kept my spirits up when despair threatened to drown me. Eventually, we discovered a small but charming one-bedroom apartment in a senior living community. It wasn't fancy or impressive, but it was spotlessly clean, had a lovely small balcony perfect for potted plants, and most importantly, the rent was something I could actually afford. "It's absolutely perfect for you," Doy declared when we first walked through it. "And look at this. They have a beautiful community garden and weekly card games in the common room." I signed the lease that very same day, feeling a strange but wonderful sense of accomplishment flowing through me. For the first time since discovering my suitcase on that doorstep, I felt like I was actively taking control of my own life rather than just helplessly reacting to one disaster after another. Moving into my new home presented its own set of challenges. With my limited budget, I couldn't afford to replace all the furniture I had left behind at Charles's house. But Dewey's church community came through like angels with donated basics. A gently used but comfortable couch, a small dining table, and a wonderfully cozy recliner. I splurged on a new mattress and fresh bedding, the one luxury I absolutely refused to compromise on. Slowly but surely, the apartment began to feel like it truly belonged to me. My phone remained stubbornly, painfully silent. No calls from Charles, no texts asking how I was adjusting, just the crushing silence of complete abandonment. I kept telling myself it was better this way, a clean break from all the toxicity. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and still felt unfamiliar, I would find myself wondering about my grandchildren, whether they ever asked about Grandma Alice, what lies Charles had told them about my sudden disappearance from their lives. 3 weeks after moving into my new sanctuary, I was carefully arranging my rescued photo albums on a bookshelf when my phone finally rang. Charles's name flashed on the screen like a ghost from my past. My heart jumped with a treacherous spark of hope, flaring despite everything that had happened. "Hello," I answered, fighting to keep my voice completely neutral. "Mom." His tone was purely business, devoid of any warmth or love. Not "how are you feeling" or "I'm sorry for everything," just straight to the money issues. "We need to discuss your credit cards." "What about them?" I asked, feeling that spark of hope die as quickly as it had been born. "They're still frozen solid. Lucy needs to buy necessities for the children." "No," I interrupted, surprising myself with how firm and final my voice sounded. "Those cards are staying frozen, Charles. I'm living on a fixed income now, and I simply cannot afford to finance Lucy's endless shopping sprees." There was a long pause, then, "Mom, please try to be reasonable here. We're still family." The word family struck me like a physical blow. "Family?" I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call it when you throw your mother out immediately after major surgery? When you secretly plot to sell the house she helped pay for and ship her off to a nursing home? You just don't understand the situation." "No, you're the one who doesn't understand." I cut him off sharply. "I trusted you with absolutely everything I had, Charles. My home, my money, my heart, my entire future. And you betrayed that trust in the most complete way possible. I will not give you another penny." His voice turned cold and hard. "Then I guess there's really nothing left for us to discuss." "I guess there isn't." I agreed, feeling that strange calm settling over me again. "Goodbye, Charles." After I hung up, I sat in my new recliner, looking around at my small but dignified apartment. Not the comfortable retirement I had planned and dreamed of, but it was mine nonetheless. The phone call had been painful, but it had also been perfectly clarifying. Charles hadn't called to reconcile or apologize. He had called for access to my money, nothing more and nothing less. That weekend, I discovered a colourful flyer in the community room advertising a support group for seniors. Life transitions, finding your way forward. Something about those words called to me like a lifeline, and the following Tuesday, I found myself walking nervously into a sunny room at the local community centre where 6 other seniors sat in a welcoming circle of chairs. Nancy, the group facilitator, greeted me with genuine warmth. "Would you like to introduce yourself and share a little about what brought you to us today?" I hesitated for a moment, then began speaking from my heart. "My name is Alice. A month ago, my son and daughter-in-law locked me out of their house immediately after I had surgery. I had sold my own home to help them financially, and they..." My voice cracked with emotion, but I forced myself to continue. "They decided I was no longer useful to them." The sympathetic, understanding faces around me gave me the courage I needed to keep going. I told them absolutely everything. The betrayal, the secret nursing home plans, the frozen credit cards, my tiny new apartment. As I spoke my truth out loud, I realized it was the very first time I had told the complete story from beginning to end. And something fundamental inside me began to shift and heal. The shame I had been carrying like a heavy burden, the terrible sense that I must have somehow deserved this cruel treatment, began to dissolve like sugar in warm water. "Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Alice," Nancy said when I finished. "Unfortunately, elder financial abuse from family members is far more common than most people realize. What you're experiencing is a recognized pattern." A silver-haired woman named Eleanor reached over and squeezed my hand with genuine compassion. "My own daughter did something very similar to me," she confided quietly. "It took me several years to rebuild my life completely, but I did it successfully. And you're going to do it too." As the meeting continued, others shared their own heartbreaking stories. Some remarkably similar to mine, others different but equally challenging and painful. By the time we broke for coffee and homemade cookies, I felt something I hadn't dared to expect: a true sense of belonging and community. These wonderful people understood exactly what I was going through without any judgment or pity. When I left the meeting that day, I had 3 phone numbers in my purse, and a warm invitation to join Eleanor and another lovely woman named Margaret for lunch the following week. Back in my apartment that evening, I stepped out onto my small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and deep pinks. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to imagine a future that was different from anything I had originally planned. Not necessarily worse or diminished, just completely different. A future where I made my own decisions, built genuine new friendships, and learned to trust again, carefully and selectively this time. It wouldn't be easy or simple. The pain of Charles's betrayal still cut like a knife through my heart. But standing there in the fading golden light, I felt something unfamiliar and wonderful stirring deep within me. Not just mere survival, but the real possibility of actually thriving. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book. Autumn melted into winter, and winter gradually softened into the hope of spring. My little apartment had transformed into a true home, lovingly decorated with treasured family photos and a few carefully chosen new pieces that reflected who I was becoming. The support group had become my emotional lifeline, and Eleanor and Margaret had blossomed into dear, trusted friends. We met weekly for coffee and conversation, card games, or peaceful walks in the park when the weather was kind to us. My life had developed a comforting, peaceful rhythm until the day I received a completely unexpected letter from a real estate agency. "Congratulations on the successful sale of your property," it began cheerfully, listing an address I recognized with a shock of ice-cold recognition. Charles's house? The house I had helped create with my life savings. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I read further. The letter was addressed directly to me as a co-investor in the property, formally informing me that the house had sold for an impressive $685,000. I stared at the official paper in complete disbelief. They had actually done it. They had sold the house I had poured my heart and savings into. And somehow, impossibly, they had used my name in the legal process. I called Dewey immediately, my voice shaking with shock and rage. "They sold the house," I said, barely able to form the words. "And somehow they've officially listed me as being involved in the sale." "That's completely impossible," Dewey said, her voice rising with indignation. "Your name isn't on the deed." "How could they legally do that?" She paused, thinking. "Unless they forged documents with your signature." "Alice, you need to talk to a lawyer immediately." The next day, I found myself sitting across from Patricia Winters, an attorney specializing in elder law, whom Eleanor had highly recommended. She reviewed the mysterious letter with a deepening frown of concern. "This is extremely troubling," she said seriously. "They couldn't legally sell the house using your name as a co-owner unless there's official documentation bearing your genuine signature. Did you ever sign any papers regarding ownership of the house?" I thought back carefully through the haze of memory. Charles had me sign some official papers when I first moved in with them. He told me it was purely for tax purposes. Something about the financial contribution I was making. Patricia nodded grimly, her expression growing darker. "I'd like to investigate this situation much more thoroughly. In the meantime, I strongly suggest we arrange a formal meeting with Charles and Lucy. If they've committed fraud, they need to understand there will be serious legal consequences." The thought of confronting them face to face sent waves of anxiety through my entire body, but also a strange, fierce sense of anticipation. For months, I had been quietly rebuilding my life, slowly discovering my own inner strength. Perhaps it was finally time to show them exactly who I had become. Patricia helped me draft a formal, legally binding letter requesting an immediate meeting. We sent it by certified mail to ensure they couldn't possibly claim they never received it. 3 tense days later, Charles called me. "What exactly is this all about, Mom?" he demanded, his voice tight with stress and anger. "Why are you involving lawyers in family business?" "I think you know exactly what this is about," I replied with newfound calm. "The house sale, and my name being used without my knowledge or permission." A long telling pause. "That's our private business, not yours. Not according to the official letter I received congratulating me on the sale," I countered smoothly. Somehow my name was directly involved in a major transaction I knew absolutely nothing about. He sighed heavily, clearly frustrated. "Fine, we can meet and discuss this, but leave your lawyer out of it. This should stay family business." "The time for handling things as family business ended when you put my suitcase on the doorstep, Charles," I said, surprising myself with how steady and strong my voice sounded. "Patricia will definitely be there. And I strongly suggest you bring your own legal representation." We arranged to meet at a completely neutral location, a private conference room at a local restaurant. I spent the days leading up to the meeting alternating between crushing anxiety and a strange, fierce determination I had never felt before. The night before our confrontation, Eleanor called to check on me and offer support. "Remember this," she said firmly. "You're not just fighting for your money. You're fighting for your dignity and self-respect. Don't let them see you waver for even a second." The morning of the meeting, I dressed with special care in a crisp blue dress that Dewey said brought out the colour of my eyes, applied light but confident makeup, and styled my hair perfectly. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognised the strong, confident woman staring back at me. 6 months ago, I had been broken, betrayed, and literally homeless. Today, I stood tall and proud, ready to face the people who had tried their best to destroy me. Patricia picked me up in her car, reviewing our legal strategy as we drove through the city. Let them do most of the talking first, she advised wisely. People often reveal much more than they intend when they're feeling defensive and cornered. Charles and Lucy were already seated at the conference table when we arrived. Along with a thin, nervous-looking man, Patricia immediately identified as James Porter, a local attorney known primarily for real estate transactions. Lucy looked visibly tense, her usually polished appearance slightly frayed around the edges. Charles refused to meet my eyes directly, staring down at his hands instead. "Thank you all for coming today." Patricia began professionally, setting a thick folder on the table. "We're here to discuss the recent sale of the property at 1472 Maple Avenue, and specifically my client's substantial financial interest in that property." James Porter cleared his throat uncomfortably. "My clients maintain that Mrs. Brennan had no legal ownership interest in the property. Her financial contribution was clearly a gift, as documented in this paper." He slid a single document across the polished table. Patricia examined it briefly with expert eyes. "This document simply acknowledges a financial contribution. It doesn't legally classify it as a gift for tax or ownership purposes. Furthermore, we have solid evidence that Mrs. Brennan's name was used in the sale process without her knowledge or consent." Charles shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Lucy's face had gone completely pale. "Perhaps," Patricia continued with professional calm, "you could explain why Mrs. Brennan received this congratulatory letter." She placed the real estate agency's letter prominently on the table. "That was clearly an administrative error," James said quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. "The agency was incorrectly informed that Mrs. Brennan had contributed to the home's renovations and mistakenly listed her as a party to the sale." "A very interesting error," Patricia noted dryly, "especially since my client's signature appears on these preliminary sale documents." She produced another official paper. This signature, which Mrs. Brennan absolutely confirms she did not provide. The conference room went completely silent. Lucy's hands were trembling visibly now. Charles looked like he might actually be sick. "That's an extremely serious allegation," James said, his professional composure slipping badly. "Are you directly accusing my clients of committing forgery?" "I'm not accusing anyone of anything," Patricia replied with ice-cold evenness. "I'm simply presenting facts and evidence. Now we can pursue this matter through the court system. With all the public exposure and media attention that would inevitably entail, or we can reach a reasonable settlement agreement today." Charles finally spoke, his voice strained and desperate. "What exactly do you want from us, Mom?" For the first time since entering the room, I looked directly into my son's eyes. The boy I had raised with such love, the man who had betrayed me so completely and callously. Something deep inside me softened, not in weakness, but in mature understanding. He wasn't an evil monster. He was just weak, too easily influenced by Lucy's materialistic greed and too willing to sacrifice his mother for temporary comfort and convenience. "I want what's fair and right," I said simply, my voice steady and clear. "I contributed $178,000 to that house. I want it returned with reasonable interest." Lucy made a strangled choking sound. "That's completely ridiculous. That money was obviously a gift." "Was it really?" I asked, turning to look at her directly. "Was it also a gift when you used my credit cards without any permission? Was it a gift when you packed my belongings in cardboard boxes and dumped them in the garage? Was it a gift when you planned to warehouse me in a nursing home without my knowledge?" Lucy's face flushed bright red with embarrassment and anger. "You don't understand how complicated the situation was." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, my voice growing stronger. "I understand that you saw me as nothing more than a convenient source of free money and childcare. And when I became inconvenient, when I needed care and support after surgery, you discarded me without a second thought like a piece of garbage." Charles stared down at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. "Mom, it really wasn't like that." "Then please explain to me exactly what it was like, Charles," I said, genuinely curious now. "Please help me understand how a son locks his mother out of the house immediately after major surgery." He had absolutely no answer for that question. Patricia gently but firmly steered our conversation back to the business at hand. My client is prepared to settle this matter for the original amount plus 6% annual interest, totaling approximately $188,000. Given all the circumstances, I believe this is more than reasonable and generous. James huddled intensely with Charles and Lucy, their whispered conversation growing increasingly tense and desperate. Finally, James straightened up with obvious reluctance. My clients are prepared to offer $150,000 as a complete and final settlement, he announced. Patricia looked at me with raised eyebrows, asking the question silently. I considered the offer for a long moment, weighing my options carefully. The exact dollar amount was honestly less important to me than the official acknowledgement of what they had done to me. We accept that offer, Patricia said formally, on the strict condition that the funds are transferred within 7 business days, and that both parties sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement about the specific circumstances of this settlement. As Patricia and James worked out all the legal details, I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange but wonderful sense of peace washing over me like warm water. Money could never heal the deep wound of family betrayal, but it would secure my future and give me real choices. A future I now looked forward to with unexpected joy and hope. 1 full year after being locked out of what I had believed was my permanent home, I stood in the warm, fragrant kitchen of my new bakery. Sweet memories, breathing in the rich aroma of cinnamon and vanilla that had become the scent of my new life. The morning sun streamed through sparkling clean windows, casting a golden glow over the freshly painted walls and gleaming stainless steel countertops. These blueberry muffins look absolutely perfect, Joy said with pride, carefully arranging a fresh batch in the glass display case. I still can't believe we actually made this dream come true. I smiled widely, watching my dearest friend fuss over the pastries as if they were precious jewels. 6 months ago, when I had received the settlement money from Charles and Lucy, Joey had made a casual comment about how my famous apple pie could probably sell out at any bakery in town. What had started as a light-hearted joke had gradually grown into serious conversations, then detailed business planning, and finally this beautiful reality. I couldn't have accomplished any of this without you, I told her sincerely, adjusting my crisp new apron. At 69 years old, I had never imagined I would be opening my own business. But here I was, proud co-owner of a small, but absolutely charming bakery specializing in traditional homemade desserts that reminded people of their grandmother's kitchens. The cheerful bell above the door chimed and Eleanor walked in with a bright smile, followed by Margaret and 3 other dear friends from my support group. Alice, it's absolutely beautiful, Eleanor exclaimed, looking around with obvious approval and joy. Everything is completely perfect. We brought you a special gift, Margaret said warmly, presenting a small potted tree with delicate branches. It's a dwarf apple tree for new beginnings and sweet futures. Tears of gratitude stung my eyes as I accepted their thoughtful gift. Thank you, all of you, for absolutely everything you've done for me. The past year had completely transformed my life in ways I never could have imagined possible. The settlement money had given me wonderful options and security, but it was the deep friendships I had formed that had truly saved my soul. The support group had become my emotional lifeline, a sacred circle of people who understood loss and rebuilding because they had walked through the fire themselves. Our grand opening day was a modest but genuine success. Curious neighbours wandered in throughout the day, attracted by our hand-painted sign and the irresistible scent of fresh baking wafting down the sidewalk. By noon, we had sold more than half our inventory, and by closing time, the display cases were nearly empty. I'd call that a complete triumph, Dewey declared happily as we counted the day's surprisingly good earnings. We might actually make this wonderful venture work long-term. I nodded, too exhausted to speak, but feeling a deep satisfaction and pride I hadn't experienced in years. This small bakery represented so much more than just a business venture or source of income. It was living, breathing proof that life could begin again at any age. That betrayal and heartbreak didn't have to be the end of anyone's story. The following week settled into a pleasant, fulfilling rhythm that nourished my soul. I would rise before dawn to begin the day's baking, finding my creative groove in the peaceful morning hours, then welcome a steady stream of customers throughout the day. The work was physically demanding for a woman my age, but it gave me genuine purpose and meaning. and the frequent compliments about my baking fed my spirit in ways I hadn't realized I desperately needed. 3 months after our successful opening, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the familiar bell chimed softly. I looked up from carefully arranging a tray of lemon tarts to see Charles standing awkwardly in the doorway like a lost child. My heart stuttered and nearly stopped. We hadn't spoken a single word since that tense settlement meeting. The sight of him, noticeably thinner now with new worry lines etched around his tired eyes, sent a complex wave of conflicting emotions crashing through me. Love, hurt, anger, and something that felt surprisingly like pity. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the soft background music playing in the bakery. I wiped my hands carefully on my apron, buying myself a moment to compose my thoughts. "Charles, this is certainly a surprise." He shifted his weight uncomfortably from foot to foot, looking around at the cheerful, welcoming space I had created. "This place is really nice. The bakery. It suits you perfectly." "Thank you," I replied, working hard to keep my voice completely neutral. "What brings you here today?" He took a deep, shaky breath. "I'm in serious trouble, Mom." Of course he was. Why else would he seek me out after all this painful time and silence? "What kind of trouble?" I asked, though I could easily guess the answer. "Financial trouble," he admitted, staring down at the floor in shame. "Lucy left me. She took the kids and moved back to her mother's house in Arizona. All the money from the house sale is completely gone. I honestly don't know exactly how it disappeared so fast. Lucy handled all our finances." He let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "Pretty ironic, isn't it, after everything that happened with you?" I studied my son's face carefully, the face I had once known better than my own reflection. He looked utterly broken, humbled in a way I had never seen before in his entire life. "I'm genuinely sorry to hear about all of that," I said, surprised to discover I actually meant those words. "Especially about losing the children. You must miss them terribly." He nodded quickly, blinking back what looked like tears. "I do miss them every single day. I'm trying to figure out how to get them back, how to prove I can provide for them. But first I need to get back on my feet financially." He finally raised his eyes to meet mine directly. "I know I have absolutely no right to ask anything of you. Not after what we did to you. But I honestly don't know where else to turn for help. There was a time not so long ago when those desperate words would have been all it took for me to immediately open my wallet, my home, and my heart without question. But I wasn't that woman anymore." "What exactly are you asking me for, Charles?" He hesitated, clearly struggling with his pride. "A loan. Just enough to help me until I can sell the lake house and find something much more affordable." Ah, yes, the lake house. The dream property they had planned to purchase with the proceeds from selling the home I had helped pay for. The bitter irony of the situation wasn't lost on me at all. "I can't do that," I said gently but with absolute firmness. His face crumpled with disappointment. "Mom, please, I understand completely why you're angry with me." "This has nothing to do with anger anymore," I interrupted calmly. "This is about healthy boundaries. This is about learning from painful experience." I took a deep breath. "But I can offer you something else instead." "What?" he asked with a flicker of hope. "A job," I said simply. "We need help with deliveries and some of the heavier lifting around here. It doesn't pay very much, but it's honest work that you can be proud of." Charles stared at me in obvious shock, clearly having expected either complete rejection or an unconditional handout. "You would actually hire me after everything we put you through?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Not because you deserve it, but because I choose to offer it." He stood quietly for a long moment, clearly thinking hard about my unexpected offer. "When would I start?" "Tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. The serious baking starts very early." He nodded slowly with what looked like genuine gratitude. "Okay. Thank you, Mom." "Really?" After he left, Dewey emerged from the back room where she had been tactfully giving us privacy for that difficult conversation. "Are you absolutely sure about this decision?" she asked, genuine concern written across her caring face. "No," I admitted honestly, "but it feels right in my heart. Not for him, but for me." The truth was, offering Charles a job rather than a loan was as much about my own healing journey as it was about his immediate needs. I was setting clear, healthy boundaries, maintaining my hard-won dignity while still leaving the door open just a crack for the possibility of eventual reconciliation. 2 months later, Charles was still faithfully showing up every morning at exactly 5 o'clock, making deliveries, washing endless dishes. and gradually learning the basic techniques of baking. Our relationship remained carefully tentative, built on polite conversations about neutral topics and shared daily tasks. We didn't discuss Lucy or rehash the painful past, focusing instead on the work that needed to be done each day. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was definitely something positive. A fragile bridge being constructed one careful plank at a time. On a beautifully warm Sunday afternoon, my treasured day off, I sat on the small patio of my apartment, lovingly tending to the potted herbs I had started growing. The dwarf apple tree from my dear friends had produced its very first tiny fruit. Just one small, imperfect apple. But it felt like a tremendous victory nonetheless. My phone rang cheerfully and I smiled automatically, seeing Eleanor's familiar name on the screen. "So tell me everything," I said teasingly. "How was your romantic date?" Eleanor had recently begun seeing Richard, a kind widower she had met at the community garden. "It was absolutely wonderful," she sighed happily. "He took me to that charming new Italian restaurant by the lake. But I'm actually calling to talk about you. Are we still on for dinner tonight? Richard is bringing his friend William." I chuckled warmly. "Are you still trying to play matchmaker and set me up with William?" "He's such a lovely man, Alice. A retired English professor who's been widowed for 5 years. He loves baking and gardening, and he has the kindest, warmest eyes I've ever seen. I'll definitely be there," I promised, genuinely surprising myself with how much I was looking forward to meeting him. As I hung up the phone, I gazed around my small but absolutely beautiful living space. The thriving plants, the comfortable furniture, the framed photographs of my wonderful new friends displayed alongside cherished old memories. None of this was remotely what I had planned or expected for my retirement years. It was completely different, totally unexpected, but somehow infinitely richer than anything I could have imagined. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy my very soul had instead forced me to discover inner strengths I never knew I possessed. It had stripped away comfortable illusions and replaced them with authentic, meaningful connections. It had taken away my false sense of security and given me genuine independence and self-respect. I carefully picked the single apple from my little tree, feeling its skin smooth and cool against my palm. It wasn't perfect by any measure, slightly lopsided and smaller than anything you'd buy in a store, but it was completely genuine, hard-won through patience and care, and sweet with the promise of many more to come. Just like my beautiful new life.